Now the world is much more complicated. The Cold War luckily is finished, but a lot of other tensions have occurred. Look at what's happening in Gaza, in Israel in the last few days, in Ukraine last year, in Afghanistan 2 years ago. What does it mean? Many refugees fleeing from this instability, and more resources needed, more solutions needed, and everything is difficult at the moment.
ผู้ลี้ภัยในเวลานี้นะครับทั่วโลกสูงถึง110 ล้านคนสูงเป็นประวัติการณ์นะครับตั้งแต่สงครามโลกครั้งที่2เป็นต้นมา
And then you have across all this climate change. Why? Because climate change makes conditions so difficult in some places that people leave.
From many challenges that has been around us, what are your top priorities for UNHCR in coming year?
What's your secret?
คว้าโอกาสล่าอนาคตล้วงอินไซต์ถ้าคุณคือคนที่ต้องนำองค์กรบริหารขับเคลื่อนธุรกิจสู่อนาคตถ้าคุณคือคนที่ต้องมีส่วนร่วมในการกำหนดนโยบายวางกลยุทธ์ทั้งภาครัฐและเอกชนถ้าคุณคือคนรุ่นใหม่ที่ต้องการสร้างความเปลี่ยนแปลงนี่คือฟอรัมแห่งปีที่คุณไม่ควรพลาดครับจัดต่อเนื่องเป็นปีที่ 4 กับงาน The Standard Economic Forum 2023 Future Ready Thailand เศรษฐกิจไทยไล่ล่าอนาคตรวมผู้นำระดับโลกและไทยกว่า 40 คนไว้ในงานเดียวพบกับเศรษฐาทวีสินบรรทุลล่ำซำเศรษฐพุทธสุทธิวาฒนฤพุทธสุรเกียรติเสถียรไทยสุภวุฒิสายเชื้อกอบศักดิ์ภูตระกูลพยงศรีวณิชคัตยาอินทรวิชัยสมโพธิ์อาหุไนธนาธรจึงรุ่งเรืองกิจฟาบริซิโอซาโคเน่เก็บครบทุกมิติเจาะลึกเมกะเทรนด์ 2024 ทั้งมิติเศรษฐกิจพลังงานเทคโนโลยีสิ่งแวดล้อมสังคมและการเมืองเจาะลึกอินไซต์อัปเดตข้อมูลล่าสุดก่อนใครจากผู้เชี่ยวชาญตัวจริงแลกเปลี่ยนความรู้ลุกวงในกับผู้นำทางความคิดระดับโลกและไทยกว่า 40 คนเปิดโอกาสในการสร้างเน็ตเวิร์กิ่งคอมมูนิตี้ที่รวมผู้นำและผู้ออกแบบนโยบายกว่า 3,000 คนพบกันวันที่ 23-25 พฤศจิกายน 2566 จัด 3 วันเต็มณศูนย์การประชุมแห่งชาติเศรษฐกิจซื้อบัตร Early Bird ราคา 2,500 บาทได้แล้ววันนี้ถึง 31 ตุลาคมเท่านั้นคว้าโอกาสล่าอนาคตล้วงอินไซต์กับงาน The Standard Economic Forum 2023 Future Ready Thailand เศรษฐกิจไทยไล่ล่าอนาคตผมเชื่อว่าภารกิจของภาคธุรกิจในปัจจุบันนี้ไม่ใช่แค่ทำกำไรอย่างเดียวนะครับทุกคนพูดกันถึงเรื่องของ ESG หรือว่า Profit People แล้วก็ Planet มากขึ้นวันนี้อยากจะชวนคุยคำว่า People หรือว่าตัว S ใน ESG ก็คือปัญหาเรื่องของสังคมซึ่งมีหลากหลายมิติมากนะครับแต่ว่าปัญหาหนึ่งที่หลายคนอาจจะไม่ทราบว่ามันทวีความซับซ้อนแล้วก็รุนแรงมากขึ้นเรื่อยๆก็คือปัญหาของผู้ลี้ภัยนะครับตัวเลขล่าสุดที่ผมได้มาเนี่ยจำนวนผู้ลี้ภัยในเวลานี้นะครับทั่วโลกสูงถึง110 ล้านคนสูงเป็นประวัติการณ์นะครับตั้งแต่สงครามโลกครั้งที่2เป็นต้นมาแล้วก็ถ้าเกิดเปรียบเทียบเป็นประชากรเนี่ยมันเท่ากับประเทศไทย2ประเทศรวมกันเลยสาเหตุนั้นมาจากหลากหลายสาเหตุมากนะครับแต่ว่าสิ่งสำคัญก็คือว่ามีหน่วยงานหนึ่งที่เขาทำงานด้านนี้มาอย่างต่อเนื่องแล้วก็ทุ่มเทในการช่วยเหลือผู้ลี้ภัยนะครับนั่นก็คือ UNHCRวันนี้ผมโชคดีมากนะครับมีโอกาสได้พูดคุยกับ UNHCR ที่เป็น High Commissioner เลยนะครับนั่นก็คือคุณฟิลิปโป กรันดีท่านเป็น High Commissioner ที่ดูแลด้านนี้โดยตรงแล้วก็เข้าใจเรื่องของปัญหาแล้วก็โซลูชันต่างๆสิ่งที่เราจะพูดคุยกันแน่นอนก็จะพูดคุยกันถึงเรื่องของปัญหาในระดับโลกว่ามันเป็นอย่างไรในตอนนี้พูดถึงว่าปัจจัยที่ทำให้เกิดปัญหาเหล่านี้มันซับซ้อนมากขึ้นเป็นอย่างไรแล้วก็สำคัญที่สุดที่น่าจะใกล้ตัวกับคุณผู้ฟังคุณผู้ชม The Secret Sauce มากที่สุดก็คือภาคธุรกิจนะครับหรือว่าภาคองค์กรเอกชนเนี่ยจะทำอะไรได้บ้างนะครับผมใบ้นิดนึงคือสิ่งที่น่าสนใจคือตอนนี้มันมีส่วนหนึ่งที่เราอาจจะทำกันบ้างอยู่แล้วก็คือเป็น donors นะครับหรือว่าเป็นคนที่บริจาคเงินให้กับ UNHCR ซึ่งก็ยังต้องการเงินเหล่านี้อยู่ไปช่วยเหลือ แต่อีกมุมหนึ่งตอนนี้สามารถเป็นพาร์ทเนอร์ได้คือทำตั้งแต่ต้นทางแล้วผมคิดว่านี่มันเป็นภารกิจหนึ่งของภาคธุรกิจที่จำเป็นต้อง address กับปัญหาที่มันใกล้ตัวกับพวกเรามากขึ้นเรื่อยๆโดยเฉพาะในประเทศไทยเองนะครับก็มีความท้าทายเรื่องคนไร้รัฐคนไร้สัญชาติหรือว่าผู้ลี้ภัยบริเวณชายแดนไทยเมียนมามากพอสมควรเลยทีเดียวเดี๋ยวลองไปฟังคุณฟิลิปโป กันดี้เล่าให้ฟังนะครับว่าปัญหานี้มันเป็นอย่างไรและทางออกคืออะไรและภาคธุรกิจหรือว่าคุณผู้ชมทุกคนเนี่ยจะทำอะไรได้บ้างกับเรื่องนี้ครับลองไปฟังดูครับโอเคสวัสดีครับ
ครับสวัสดีครับ
Good afternoon Mr. Filippo Grandi UN High Commissioner for Refugee Thank you for joining us today My name is Ken and right now I am CEO and Editor-in-Chief of The Standard So I'm truly honored to be here today to talk about the global refugee crisis and your visions for the future of refugee protection. So my first question is, can you give us an overview of the global situation of refugee crisis?
First of all, thank you very much, Hon King, for inviting me to your program. I'm very honored. May I say that I'm honored also to speak to a Thai public. I started my long career working on humanitarian issues here in Thailand. So
Wow.
for me, it's also always a homecoming to come back to the country where I started, and I started learning about refugees as well, because my first job here was with Cambodian refugees in
Wow.
those faraway days.
Wow.
Many people were not born at that time, including yourself.
Yeah, like me.
So if I reflect, actually answering your question, to how this issue has evolved, it's very interesting. Because unfortunately, the number of refugees has skyrocketed. Now there are 110 million refugees or displaced people around the world. And back then it was, I don't have the statistic of that year, but it was maybe a few million people. So, and you know, back then when I worked here in the 80s was the Cold War. In fact, Thailand was on the border of the Cold War because communist regimes on the east of the country and the refugees were crossing that divide. Now the world is much more complicated. The Cold War, luckily, is finished, but a lot of other tensions have occurred. Look at what's happening in Gaza, in Israel in the last few days, in Ukraine last year, in Afghanistan 2 years ago. So many conflicts, many wars, complicated world, difficult to make peace. What does it mean? Many refugees fleeing from this instability and more resources needed, more solutions needed, and everything is difficult at the moment.
So compare with the situation in the past 40 years ago. If you would describe us, what are the root causes behind the situation?
For, you know, in the UN, in UNHCR, we say that refugees are people that are escaping from violence or war or persecution or human rights violations. And conflict in particular, fighting, is the biggest cause of causing refugee flows. If you look at what's happening in Sudan, these are faraway places from here, but big wars. Or what's happening in Myanmar with a lot of violence and impacting civilian populations, or other situations in Ukraine, for example. It is usually violence and conflict that cause flight. But what is really very significant today is that these causes are mixed with other causes. Of course, poverty and inequality also pushes people to move. They are not necessarily refugees, but they move all in the same direction. This for economic purposes, migrants, we would say. And then you have across all this climate change. Why? Because climate change makes conditions so difficult in some places that people leave. And what is very interesting is that climate change very often in poor places like Africa, for example, becomes a cause of conflict, because poor communities fight with each other for smaller resources, little water, little access to water because it has dried up because of climate change. This is an easy example. And so you can see how all these causes are interlinked and the flows become bigger and bigger and more complicated to handle.
Okay, get it. So the more is getting more complicated and complex. So what are the critical emergency UNHCR is dealing with?
UNHCR, of course, deals with many of these situations, also mixed situations in which you may have climate change, economic reason, and conflict reason. But our strong focus is, of course, people fleeing from refugees, people fleeing from conflict and persecution. And if you look at from that angle, we have many operations in Africa. The war in Sudan has already displaced in 6 months 5 million people. Ukraine, I think everybody has followed what happened last year, the Russian invasion, the bombing of civilian infrastructure, of cities. Lots of people went out, millions and millions of refugees in European countries and also displaced people in South Ukraine. Now people are talking a lot about Middle East, but we should not forget all the crises that were already there. This is the big problem. I give you one last example, and that's the reason why I'm here in Bangkok. One more reason is that today we organized a meeting, a conference on the situation of the Rohingya refugees. The Rohingya refugees are from a Muslim community in Myanmar, in the western side of Myanmar. For a long time they have been discriminated and they have suffered big violence. And 6 years ago, 1 million went to Bangladesh, which is just next door. So now, at that time, there was a lot of interest and a lot of support. But now, with so many crises after that, unfortunately, they get forgotten. And yet, they cannot still go home because the situation is still difficult in Myanmar, although we must work towards that. So we need to help them where they are. They are in Bangladesh and in other countries in the region. So these are I gave you some example of the biggest crises we're dealing with, but there's many others.
Yeah. So many challenges, as you mentioned, over skyrocketing, right? So what is the current assessment of the humanitarian situation in Palestine and Israel?
Well, this is, I have to here explain something a little bit complicated. UNHCR does not have a mandate to operate in Palestine or Israel. Palestinian refugees are the responsibility of another organization in the UN. It's a bit complicated, but that's the way. This is an older organization because this is such an old issue.
Okay.
So they were created just for that and they continue. But of course, it is a humanitarian situation that is of concern to everybody. What is of concern to all humanitarians like me is that civilians have been impacted. You saw Hamas killing Israeli civilians, and then now the attack of Israel to counter that attack of Hamas, the hostage taking, all this is terrible, and the destruction of infrastructure in Gaza is really causing hardship on a lot of innocent civilians. And the head of the UN, Mr. Guterres, the Secretary General, has said, please, everybody must respect the law of war. Even war has some rules that need to be respected if possible, including respecting the life of civilians. So destroying civilian infrastructure or taking civilians hostages like Hamas is doing, these are against international humanitarian law. And this worries me, even if UNHCR is not directly involved. Of course, I share the concern of the United Nations.
Access throughout Gaza so that we can
From many challenges that has been around us, what are your top priorities for UNHCR in coming years?
The top priority is to ensure that the basic principles that are the foundation of our work remain strong. And what is the main principle? In the end, refugee issues are very complicated, but you can give one example to describe the most important issue. If somebody, if like you or me, we are protected by our countries. You are protected by Thailand as a Thai citizen. I'm protected by Italy as an Italian citizen. But if something, God forbid, very bad happens in our country and our government cannot protect us anymore because there is a conflict or the government turns against us for whatever reason, then we lose the protection of our government. We escape to another country and that country must give us protection. It is a duty of all countries. In fact, it is a duty of the international community to give protection to people that have lost, for many reasons, the protection of their country. I would like this principle of protection. This is why we talk about international protection. I would like this principle to be maintained and strengthened. There are many, many threats to that. Many countries don't want to do that. Many countries say, this is old-fashioned, we need to have new rules, it's too complicated, but I think it's not too complicated. You know, in all the history of all cultures, people that have to escape, for example, because there is a war, have the right to receive protection. So I think it's important to maintain that. Then all the rest, of course, my ambition or the ambition of UNHCR, the objectives, is of course to adapt our work to this very complicated world, become better, more active in climate action, for example, that is also a prevention of refugees or refugee flows. Or, you know, when refugee situations are very big, like we see in Bangladesh today, last for very long, how can we ensure that people are supported for many years when the interest goes away? We have to be creative. And for that, we don't need only states or UN organization. We need societies to help us, private sector to help us, development organization. That's why we are expanding our reach to all these interlocutors.
I just came back from World Bank IMF annual meetings.
Marrakesh.
Yeah, in Marrakesh. And it's really interesting because Ajay Banga, President World Bank, said on the stage that the world is getting more complicated, intervene challenges. And they have to create a new playbook for addressing these challenges. So from your perspective, do you think UNHCR have to create a new playbook for addressing all these challenges?
You know, important organizations like the World Bank, it's good that they say this, because of course we need a new playbook, and they are well placed with their resources, their experience, their mandate to reduce the world poverty. They're well placed to write the new playbook. You know. We are in the middle of the playbook, unfortunately. We are in the pages of the playbook, so we want this to happen, and we want those that write the playbook, decision makers, political leaders, business leaders, we want them to listen to people like us that are out there in the field with the refugees, with the vulnerable people, because we know what is needed. And you know, I fully agree with Ajay Banga. By the way, you know, we have a great partnership with the World Bank that really is trying to look at new ways to help vulnerability. But what we need is for them, that's my challenge to them all the time, is understand that normally when there used to be a crisis, the old playbook said, okay, humanitarian agencies, you go, deal with the crisis.
Yes.
Then when you're done, we come and we look at the long term. Finish. Now you need to look at the long term in the beginning. I was, maybe not many Thai people know where this is, but I was in Chad. Chad is a big country in Africa, in the middle of Africa.
Okay.
It is at the moment in the middle of a big crisis, humanitarian crisis, because it has a border with Sudan, where there is a war. So many Sudanese people, up to now 400,000, have gone into Chad. So we have a humanitarian operation. This is our duty as UNHCR, together with the government of Chad. But what we did is we asked the World Bank, come with us at the beginning. So I went there with one of Ajay Banga's deputies.
Okay.
And together, we looked at what UNHCR does short term, immediately to save lives together with our other partners, and what the World Bank can do from the beginning to ensure that when humanitarian assistance goes down, which happens quite quickly, they can invest in the long term, in education system, in sustainable energy, in food security, so that, if you build the food security of this vulnerable population at the beginning, then you don't need to mobilize food distributions for many years because they can grow their own food. I'm giving you a simple example, which is quite complicated to do, but that's why we want the World Bank or development organization like the ones in Marrakesh to come quickly and to invest resources early, like we do, but with a longer horizon.
Okay. Oh, thank you for your answer. It resonates to my next question. I think today business landscape is changing, and businesses are increasingly recognizing the importance of ESG. And I think in particular the societal component of ESG is becoming important. So as businesses realize that they have a role, have a role to play in addressing social challenges such as refugee crisis. So what are your thoughts on the role of businesses?
I agree with you, and thank you for the work you are doing to encourage them in that direction. The traditional, very well, the traditional role of businesses in respect to our issues, humanitarian problems, was one of philanthropy. Businesses gave money to help with the humanitarian efforts, donations. And don't get me wrong, this is still very important. We still benefit a lot, including here in Thailand, individuals and companies and other private organizations are actually donating funds to our effort, and we are very grateful for that. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of them. But I think businesses have realized that they can do more than that. They can be not just donors, but partners in responding to crisis. And I can give you so many, I get very passionate about this. I can give you many examples of how with some big private enterprises, like IKEA, for example, the furniture company, or Vodafone, telecommunication, or Google, tech company, and many, many others, or Uniqlo in Japan, the clothing company. They have become partners. For example, we work with them in employing refugees, giving employment, or even simply giving skills training to refugees in many situations, because that allows them to become employable, which is really the best protection you can give to any of them. With many companies, we partner around technology. So, of course, private sector is much more advanced than we are in the use of technology, but they can, this technology transfer helping us use that technology in so many ways. Look, UNHCR in particular, we work on documentation of people or distribution of goods. Technology makes all of this more efficient, more safe, because you cannot duplicate or forge that easily. So I'm just giving you a few examples, but I can give you so many in which business has become our partner of choice. Of course, states in a matter of refugees still have the biggest responsibility because they have the solutions in hand. But I think that the contribution of the private sector is becoming indispensable. And between philanthropy and partnership, it's becoming big. Last year, UNHCR is an organization funded voluntarily by states or by private people. Last year, we reached almost 20% of the contributions from private sources. Almost 20%. Well over $1 billion were contributed. So there is a growing support for an organization like ours, and I think it's very healthy. In a couple of months, we will have a big event in Geneva called the Global Refugee Forum. This is the biggest refugee meeting on the theme of refugees in the world every 4 years. And a lot of the participants are from companies and foundations and other private organizations.
From donors to partners, what advice would you give to business leaders who, they want to do more?
I would say, if you want to be a donor, thank you very much. Very, 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 very appreciated.
It's still important.
It's still important because we need resources to fund this huge effort. But don't think only of that. Think of the partnership. Think of where your know-how, your technology, your expertise, your business models can be useful to us to make us more efficient, more effective in protecting people. There's a lot that we have in common, more than sometimes they think. And last point on the private sphere is that, of course, so many business leaders, for example, have become big advocates. The refugee issue is always difficult. It's a difficult political matter in every country, no exception. I think that businesses that see the importance of this, because business leaders have such a big influence, can really help us also in the public domain, making the case for refugees. In the United States, in Europe, in Australia, I was there not so long ago. Many, the question of refugees is very controversial, but many companies are saying, okay, every year I just give you an example, of 100 people that we employ, we will employ 5 refugees. Fantastic. This does not penalize much because it's only 5 on 100, but those 5 are now likely to be integrated in society or included in society. So these are the type of things, advocacy and practical thing, where really partnership is great.
From those who might be unfamiliar with refugee crisis, I think they think this is too far, not relevant to them. Too many challenges that they have faced. So, what is your thought, or what is your advice, or what is your wake-up call to action for them?
I would say 2 things. One is, in a way, to also say, of course, this is one of the many challenges that the world is facing. Climate change is another one. Poverty, global poverty, inequality is another one. And the list, as you know, is very long. My appeal to the business communities, you choose which global cause is relevant to you, but do choose one at least, because these global challenges are not far away, are around the corner, or even by now they are not even around the corner. They're already in front of us.
Right.
Be it climate, the impact of inequality, conflict, and refugees as well. We live probably in the world that in the history of the world, mobility, the ability of people to move has never been greater.
Yes.
And this applies to people with money that can buy the ticket to go wherever, but it applies also to the people without money, because somebody will offer illegally, very often, services to them and exploiting them. No matter what, people can move. And if people must move, either because they are in a war as a refugee or because they are very poor as a migrant, they will move. And then they are not anymore a faraway issue, but they're an issue on our doorstep, for which we have a responsibility, but also a necessity to do something. So this is not just an abstract cause, a very nice thing to do in the evening after you finish your work. It's part of our daily lives.
Wow, amazing answer. Thank you. So from global challenges, I will move to domestic problems. So on Sunday, I heard that you went to one of the Myanmar temporary shelters along the border, right? So can you tell us more about the situation?
Yeah, there are about several tens of thousands, almost 90,000 Myanmar refugees living in these temporary shelters, in these camps along the Thai-Myanmar border. from the north of Thailand all the way to the south. I went here near Bangkok in Tham Yen, which is about 3 hours drive from here. That's a small site. It's about 5,000 people. What struck me is that the people there have been there a long time. Some of them told me more than 30 years. And actually the majority are young people that were born there. And so there is a sense of frustration after all this time. The good news is that the United States has decided to reopen what they call resettlement program. This is a traditional program they had in Thailand for many other refugees. Remember Vietnamese? And, maybe you don't remember, but I remember in the old days. So now they did it in the past also for the Myanmar refugees. They closed, now they reopen again. So that will allow many of the people, we spoke to them, to move to the US. Australia also has a program. Anyway, they will be able to move out. But yesterday when I came back to Bangkok and I had very good meetings with the government, we agreed that not everybody will go. There will not be space for everybody of these tens of thousands, and some people may not want to go. Not everybody wants that. So we agreed that for this smaller number, we need to look at, can we get them better education? Can we get them some access to employment in places where it could be useful also for the local communities? So we will study all this, but I'm happy that this reopening of the resettlement unblocked the issue a little bit, and now we can talk again about solutions for this group. Of course, all of this, the best would be if they could go back home. But the situation in Myanmar remains quite unstable, so it's difficult for them to return at this point, although I'm sure that some of them would like to.
So what is the solution? What's next? How do you engage with Royal Thai government to dealing with this?
The solutions are many. There is not one size fits all for any of these refugee groups. Here is a multiple one. Some going to the US, Australia, maybe Canada, other countries. Some maybe, hopefully, who knows, in the future can go back to their homes when they choose to do that, to their country. And some will stay here. So I think that for those we need to think, can they get a better education? Can they get better skills? We spoke about that. By the way, even those that will go to the US, it will take time. It's not like tomorrow they can go. There's a very complicated procedure. So I told the Royal Thai government, please, during this time, let's give them better skills. That can be useful also when they go to the US in a very different society. Language skills, professional skills, and so forth. So these are all the solutions that we need to work. As always, we have to work on many solutions.
Besides that situation, what are the main challenges facing stateless people in Thailand?
Yeah, Thailand has a very large stateless population. I discovered this actually a few years back because UNHCR is also responsible for stateless people. What are stateless people? Maybe not everybody know. These are people that have no nationality. Because of historical reasons and so forth, many of your hill tribes have this issue. Many people that in the old days came from other countries, they ended up being without nationality. So Thailand has been quite a champion to solve statelessness by regularizing these people. But still quite a lot needs to be done. So yesterday I encouraged the Thai government to accelerate its regularization of the people and to continue to be quite a leader in this area.
I heard that the Global Refugee Forum 2023 is taking place this December. So what are the missions of this forum?
A little bit I explained to you earlier about the forum. The forum is not just for government. This is not the usual boring government conference.
Okay.
This is a conference with energy and with a lot of participants from different groups, different communities, business community, academic, university communities, civil society, many refugees. We are expecting about 300 refugees to come, selected from different situations. So, and then of course, international organization, national ones. It will be quite dynamic, and we will discuss many things from legal issues, because UNHCR is also a legal organization, to sports for refugees and everything in between. And I think the idea is really to say this is a big global challenge. 110 million is a big global challenge. It's like a big country. And we need to do something, but it's not anymore government issue or UNHCR. It has to involve all the societies. And everybody can play a role, find solutions, and benefit from the work. So that will be the real message there, working together. And it's a challenge. It's not going to be easy because you see it by yourself. Everybody, all your listeners will appreciate we live in a very divided world. Look at how many competition between big powers, small powers. So to bring everybody together will not be difficult, but my ambition is to say these big challenges, they are for all of us. Once they become very bad, nobody will be spared. So it's better until we have time to get together and solve them. It's a little bit like climate, right? If we let more time go by quarreling about who should put the money and who should do what, then climate change will change us so much that it will be so late. And the same applies to global forced displacement.
So what role can Thailand play?
Well, Thailand is a country with huge experience. Unfortunately for Thailand, in the Cold War, it was in the border of the big divide, and then Myanmar became quite complicated country, and Thailand has a long border. It is facing an ocean, a sea that has always been theater of complicated population movements. And Thailand has learned a lot, especially during the Indochina War. Thailand was really one of the main conduits of refugee movements. So it has a lot of experience, and I hope that some of the good lessons, some lessons maybe are less good, that's the same in every country, but some of the good lessons learned here can be applicable. It may sound a little bit old-fashioned, but I'm going back to where I started.
Okay.
The origin of my work, I came here during the Cold War. In those days, the huge problem of refugees from Indochina, and especially Vietnam, was resolved through something that is called the CPA, the Comprehensive Plan of Action. The Comprehensive Plan of Action was an initiative of states in the region and a number of countries internationally to divide up the burden. We said not all the refugees can stay in Thailand or Philippines or Malaysia, but other countries have to share this burden. At that time, this was done largely through resettlement. And the US, European countries, Canada, Australia, all took some of these refugees. I don't know if this can be done for other situations because there are too many now, but what I mean is international cooperating together. And in those days, remember, still across the Cold War divide, operating together is the solution. And this is what, Thailand is at the heart of a region that in the past was in the forefront of finding solutions, and I think that this would be its main contribution. And can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Thailand is a generous country. I'm surprised by even seen from our perspective, and I'm sure other organizations the same, there's a lot of generous donors. I think it is in your culture to help discreetly, not publicly, the people who are suffering, who are more disadvantaged. And that is also an important message to bring to this forum.
Oh, thank you. Lastly, I feel a lot of energy from, this conversation. So my question is, what is the most hopeful story that you heard from your experience, from refugees, from the ground? What makes you, stay motivated all the time?
I'll tell you a story that is a little bit hopeful and a little bit not hopeful. It has both aspects. At one point in my career, about 20-something years ago, I was sent to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was coming out of the previous Taliban government. And there was a moment when Afghanistan tried to become a better governed state, more democratic, more representative, with more opportunities for its people. It was a moment of hope. At that time, at the beginning of that phase, when I went there were maybe 6 million Afghans, refugees in neighboring countries. You know what happened? As soon as this project of a new Afghanistan started, 3 million came back in the space of a couple of years. In the beginning, there were days when UNHCR was helping 20,000 Afghans every day go back to their country. That was hopeful. It shows that even people like them who had been refugees for 30 years, still, even many of them born outside in Pakistan, in Iran, they wanted to go back to their country and help rebuild the country. That to me was an incredible message of hope. The sad part of the story is that after that, Afghanistan again went into a cycle of violence. Now Taliban are back, so the situation is difficult. But that story remains in my memory and in the memory of many people, and I think in the memory of Afghans as a moment of hope. It means that when the situation improves, immediately we have to take advantage. And among the many things that you do when a conflict ends, let's think of the people that have fled and help them go back and rebuild the country, and that will send a positive message to everybody around this issue of refugees.
Well, there's always hope.
There's some hope.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, High Commissioner. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you.